welcome to this second beta edition of Dev Game Club, where we examine an old classic and talk about its value and relevance to us in the industry today, and one in which our biology yearns to merge with yours. I'm Brett Duville, along with my co-host
Tim Longo,
and we're talking about System Shock 2 here, the second time out. Last time we covered up until the end of the sort of, as you entered the sort of R&D section of the ship, and now we're playing through until you get to basically the middle of the hydroponics level of the ship. How'd this go for you, Tim?
Yeah, this is the first section, and as I'm playing, a lot of it's coming back to me. Obviously, I haven't played it since it came out, and I should mention that I didn't mention in the first episode. The only other time I played this, I actually played with a friend, co-op, because they had a co-op, kind of unofficial beta co-op patch that came out at the time, and we played through the whole thing co-op, which is a whole different experience, obviously. So it's kind of weird for me to come back into it. Obviously, remembering this stuff, but then playing it solo is a really big difference. But we were talking a little bit about this in the pre-show, but I think this section, the second segment section that we're doing here with this episode, is where that sense of I want to say persistent world / level design is coming into kind of into the forefront a lot more than the beginning. There was some of it in the beginning, but this is where you're really starting to see that back and forth a lot more. And as you were saying, Brett, kind of there's this sense of not open world or open feeling to your decisions on where you can actually travel, that because it's presented in kind of a traditional level design way of the days of old, you don't think about right away. You don't realize, oh yeah, I can go all the way back basically to the beginning, especially once you unlock the elevator and you can kind of go up and down and stuff, and it just doesn't kind of dawn on you. And I remember at the time, because so few games had done that, especially first-person games in this kind of this ilk, it just was maybe I wouldn't say revolutionary, but it was definitely a big jump forward that I really appreciated, especially for someone who came up through level design as a designer myself, and that really cool aspect of that part of the way.
It's really remarkable because, basically when you step into, or when you're coming back through into that initial area, it has opened up access to another part of the game. It's opened access to go down into R&D and all that stuff and into the engine area. And what I recall, this time through is I entirely forgot that there was going to be that sort of robot thing that I was going to have to fight my way through. And I had gone off into a little corner of the level that I hadn't explored before, and when I came back, there was the robot, and I was like, oh my god, I forgot I forgot that I was going to have to battle this robot. And it was funny because that was basically unlocked from another level. So there's that sort of persistent information that happens across a level boundary. And it sort of ties together the whole idea that this is one functioning ship, a whole consistent environment. And that's why I sort of think of it as sort of proto-open world. It has these level load barriers, but they do, things that happen in one location will cause effects in another.
Yeah, that persistence that is often, in my experience, many engines don't keep that in as a priority, especially, some of the shooter engines and stuff. And so you have to make that you should correct me if I'm wrong on the tech side, but you have to make that a priority to have that sense of persistence as far as states of things. When you do that level load and you come back, that thing you threw on the ground is still there, I believe, right? Like, other than enemies will despawn, their bodies will despawn, but they are saving that state of that world, and other more linear engines usually just dump that stuff out, and you can't retain it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You normally think of that as more of an RPG thing, an open world RPG, or really just an RPG in general. Any place you can go back. I sort of think they took it from that, but it is technically something that you have to manage separately. You have to say, this is state of the world that we're going to load that's separate from the sort of base level load. We have to know where all the enemies have died. It's actually not so much where the enemies have died, because I think the corpses actually do fade out after a certain amount of time. But if you picked something up from them and dropped it, it's going to be there. And, if you turn some valve on some level, it might have caused something to open up over here. And that was really different for a shooter at the time, for certain. I don't recall anything like that. There may have been other games where that happened. I just don't know that I remember them certainly very well.
It was the back and forth aspect that specifically, because I remember playing Half-Life back in the day, and the way that their level loads in Half-Life, they felt a little more connected and seamless than the Days of Doom or what have you, where you knew you were finished with the level, everything would unload and you'd load, loading screen would come up. I don't know if you remember, but Half-Life, you'd be in the middle of a hallway sometimes, or like a duct, and it would just load, and then you'd kind of continue moving through that duct.
Yeah, it would basically
they just didn't
freeze.
Go back and forth.
Yeah, it would basically freeze. The screen would you'd have the last frame basically captured and sit there while it loaded the next area, and then it would figure out where you needed to be in the next level to match that point of view. That's why it was often in such sort of narrow, constrained areas, because it made that problem, a lot easier to deal with, I think.
Yeah, and System Shock 2 is just taking it to the next, logical place of where, okay, I can actually move back through. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe you could in Half-Life occasionally move back and forth, but that wasn't a tenet of the game like it is here. And I think as a segue,
there wouldn't be any reason to really in Half-Life.
Yeah, it was a very forward momentum-based game as far as flow, but yeah. But as a quick segue, the other kind of category of this that relates to this design choice that they made from a level design perspective and world design is I get lost all the time.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because, just as I guess a tiny rant, because there's so many good things about the game. So, and it's an older game, so we've come ways since then. But just the concept of just keeping track of where everything is. The map is okay, but I find sometimes it confuses me more than it helps me. And maybe I need to be using the map notes more or something, which, by the way, having map notes at all is great, even though they did that in Ultima Underworld as well. But I just,
there is what you're referring to is sort of like the in-HUD map, and there's a mini-map that you can turn on as well. Yeah, I found that I had a really good sense of that initial level. Like, I could keep that all in my brain, and I had a good sense of where everything was. And then moving into the next area, which is mostly sort of the R&D, and then I guess the engine, core, and command, and all these sorts of things, I felt frequently lost there. And then in particular, once I got to hydroponics, I was often like, what have I missed? Because there was a point at which I had not gotten everything I needed to have gotten to progress, and I was just covering the map, walking with my hand on the wall, like, where have I not been? And of course, as a result, running into, occasionally respawning enemies.
Yeah, and I'm very. The reason I want to bring up the kind of getting lost, criticism in a way, because more modern game design, we've tried to crack this nut in different ways. But the thing I'm mixed about, that it kind of bums me out a little bit, because there is a sense of discovery and sense of place and really getting to know, a specific location, that now that we have modern conventions of, okay, you are keeping track of where the key is that you want to go, to go get. These days we kind of have a lot more hand-holding, and there's a lot more hints, and the maps are more effective and things like that. But it takes away that sense of discovery and that sense of exploration, because we handhold so much these days, right? So I'm kind of mixed on it, because I kind of like this resurgence that games are going through right now, whether it's the Demon Souls or what have you of the world, where things are not as forgiving. And this game is reminding me of those days when it wasn't even on our mind yet to worry about that much, because this at the time we were still impressed by the game. And I just feel like finding the keys is like needle in a haystack, and it's so frustrating. And I just like, why did they make this choice? But then on the other hand, I'm kind of glad they did.
Yeah, I can remember playing other shooters, and I'm thinking in particular of like Outlaws, where you would be looking around a level and be like, I'm going to be able to get up there at some point, but have no idea how you were going to do that. But there was a real sense of recognition when you would get to a place, and go, oh, and I can now look down where I was before and see, oh, that's how I got up here, and that sense of sort of discovery and then reconnection and I guess in a sense landmarking isn't really present. And part of that is the environment that you're working in, right? You're in this enclosed spaceship, and of course you're in 1999, so you've got limitations on texture use and just plain old memory, that you could expect the user to have. So there's definitely things that work against their ability to do those sorts of things. But I also feel like there's just some missing old-fashioned level design to connect that together in a way that I don't know that the human brain can just kind of easily map, once you have covered a space.
Yeah, there are times when I feel like, and I hope we can get a guest on for this one, who can maybe answer some of these. We'll see who we can get, but it feels like sometimes that these spaces were constructed, and then in some cases the object you're going after were placed afterward, versus the flow of getting to the object being pretty cohesive and having a good thrust for the player, so it really makes sense that you're going where you need to go. And then partnered with that is occasionally the way that the objectives are written, or the VO or something like that can confuse you. And then third, something that I didn't realize, and one of the reasons I got stuck in a couple places, is that the visual language for in a couple cases, the consoles you're supposed to critical pathwise interact with look almost identical to ambient consoles that you cannot interact with. And there would be times when I would be standing right in front of that fully lit flashing console, and right next to it was one, so I thought they were all non-interactive.
Right.
Because they all look the same.
Yeah, like where you had to put in that upgrade or whatever it was, the 45 DEX MB whatever thing. You had to put that in a place that was not obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely tricky. I mean, it told you where to go. You're going to have to install it in such and such a location, but yeah, picking that out of the environment, was not clear. Yeah, I would agree with you there.
Well, there's that. Yeah, that specific one I think was like was more of a geometry thing. What I'm talking about too, that one as well. But also the ones where it's like almost like a neon sign. Any of their computer screens that look like kind of like neon signs that are fully lit.
Right.
And then there would be like where you put the biotoxins in those consoles. They also have a fully lit neon sign kind of screen, but they would be right next to a non-interactive one. And those ones maybe I was able to find, but there's another example, I can't remember exactly where it was, where it's sort of like I had gone into the room, I had everything I needed, I'd gone into the room where I needed to use the thing multiple times and did not see what I needed to do.
Yeah.
And I think this happened to me the first time I played too. Of course, I was playing co-op, so a little bit different. But.
Right. Yeah, no, I think, I definitely agree that, and that again is, I can't give him too much a pass on that, to be honest. It feels like it's not just a texture problem, but a focus issue. Like it just doesn't lead the player to think, oh, this is important. You want what ideally I would have wanted, and I'm thinking now, especially of the sort of command area, I would have liked to have known, oh, that's the obvious place where I needed to put this thing. I mean, they've got two dead bodies in there. If they could have draped one, on top of the thing I was supposed to interact with instead of just having it up on the wall, that would have made it a lot more obvious and easier for me to track, and get to.
Yeah, it's definitely solvable, and there's so many things they get right that but there's a few things still that just frustrating at the time, and I remember getting stuck back in the day too, and I actually think I put it down at one point. We put it down at one point because we were just kind of fatigued at this problem, but and then had to return to it.
Yeah, and back then there probably wouldn't have been decent walkthroughs, or I don't know. We're also stubborn, old-time gamers, who don't want to go asking for help.
Well, I had that. There were a couple moments when I had that thought while I was playing for the show, and I forced myself not to. So I've legitimately found everything, but that needle in a haystack, and there was actually a couple times when I walked right by the body that had the key card on it that I needed, and I thought I had looted it, and I didn't.
Right.
And I was like, and then I finally go back like the fifth time and looted every body, and then realized that was one I didn't loot.
Right.
I think that happened to me in the cargo area.
Right, and that is definitely something games have improved on. Even though in most cases you still have to go and do an action to loot a body or whatever in some game, nowadays often it will tell you there is stuff here to be found. Even just to sort of visually indicate, you maybe haven't looted this thing, or at least there's something still to be found there, because you can never put anything back into a container in this game, right? You can never drag something, from, I've tried this, I didn't mean to pick these up, I'll just put it back into the container I found it, like cigarettes, which are amusing in this game. What
do they do? Did they do anything? I haven't been picking them up.
It's great. So there's sort of like these different levels of health. There's like potato chips, which just give you a bonus, and soda, I think, which just give you, a health point back. There's alcohol, which gives you a health point but takes off a psionics point.
Oh my god, I didn't even notice that.
Yes, you want to be careful there, playing as a psi player.
I'm drinking left and right. I'm like, give me some of this.
Yeah, I'll have some of that wine. Go, let me have some of that vodka. Goes good.
That's a nice touch.
Yep. And
however, I wish they would have told me.
Yep, not great for you because you're playing the psi player. My psi has been basically 0 for forever. I've put no points in the psionics. But the cigarettes, all they do is lower your health.
Right. Little commentary.
Yep, little. There's a little commentary across all of that. I mean, it's meant to be sort of realistic, but the idea that you would have an object, something that you can interact with and consume that would have literally no benefit to you, in fact, a detriment, is not something you find commonly in these days.
No, people won't. Yeah, I mean, teams won't waste the resources on it. They'll be like,
it's funny. I mean, it's just. I mean, and they're around. There's plenty of them. I went through 3 of them, bing, bing, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, my health just dropped 3 points. Just standing here doing that. Yeah, really funny.
That's another kind of to the whole hand-holding kind of conundrum in a way. That was another aspect that I'm very mixed on, because there's definitely various things that I don't think they do a great job at teaching you. But then, to your point about the cigarettes, there is that sense of discovery where you're just going to kind of explore and fool around with stuff and see what it does to you. And but there are occasionally times, like for instance, getting into the research with the chemicals more. I'd forgotten how all that worked, and I kept trying to research the biotoxin thing.
Right.
And I had the stuff in my inventory, and I initially thought that's all I needed. I just needed it in my inventory, and it wouldn't progress. And then I realized at some point, I think it was semi-accidental. I clicked on it in my inventory, and it consumed it, and then it continued to research beyond what I.
Right, because it'll basically, with the way research works is some research things can just, you can start researching and we'll just research them end to end. Basically, a couple of the enemy components. If you're able to do research at all, which is also something they withhold from you, and I'll get to that in a moment. But it's a skill and you can purchase it. And if you have a research object which requires sort of chemicals to hurry the research along or whatever, you can basically do some of the research and then it'll stop. And you have to activate chemicals in your inventory to have that research continue. So in the case of those toxins that you have to release, and I think you have to research them to release them, is that true?
You have to release you have to research one of them so because one of the objectives is literally find and reveal the neurotoxin.
Oh,
so
okay.
you have that beaker, but you don't know what it is, and so they won't let you insert it into the device until you research it.
And so I think it's actually technically probably possible to break the game at that point, because unlocking research is a use of cyber modules, right, which are a very limited resource. I think there's so many of them in the game.
I haven't. I never researched research. I just did it. So you chose it as a skill, you're saying?
I had to add it as a skill. I don't think I had it to begin with. Yes, in fact, I did, and this might be different for a player who's playing the psionics thing, the OSA. I remember getting into the sort of command core area of the ship, which is at the end of a very complicated series of hallways, and behind a couple of turrets, a particularly difficult area. And actually, as I recall, the source of one of my most terrifying moments in games. So we'll get to that in a moment. But I had gotten through that, up into that area in the command control area, and there were a couple of upgrade stations there. You could upgrade maybe your stats, and one was your sort of technical skills. And at that point, I had to upgrade research, or I think I chose to upgrade research. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting about how that all worked was, I had kind of not thought, I could go all the way back to the beginning and actually upgrade my weapon skills. So there's sort of a soft barrier to doing that. You're kind of, you have the opportunity at that point to upgrade sort of, I guess, repair and maintenance and research, different sorts of skills that are not combat focused, or your base stats, your character's strength and whatever else is important to the character.
Well,
So I had kind of gotten to that point, and what was interesting to me is there's actually a high barrier to entry to adding any of those skills. It's like 10 cyber modules or whatever to upgrade, to have the first level, to go from not being able to do a thing to being able to do a thing, whether that's hacking or repair or maintenance or what have you. So there's like this high barrier for the first level, but then the second level is half that. It's like 10 points to go from 0 to 1 and 5 points from 1 to 2. And then I think it starts climbing again. So it's, maybe 8 points or something to go from 2 to 3.
Oh, that's interesting. It's opposite for Psi. It keeps going up.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so, I thought that was unusual for an RPG. Like, that's an unusual mechanic. It's sort of like saying you need to know you're going to commit to do this thing because we're going to make it hard for you to get in. But once you get in, it's not going to be as hard for a while. That's totally different from... like a Far Cry 4, which I just played last fall, where it's like, most of these things are like just 1 point. And then you start to have other things that are harder to unlock. It takes you 2 points or 3 points or 4 points or whatever, basically levels of achievement in that economy to unlock those skills or to make you able to do different sorts of things or make you do more damage with certain weapons or whatever. And here it's a little different. But I agree, I think with weapons, it actually is just a climbing thing. Once you've committed to a weapon, you can get better, make that weapon do more damage, or that weapon type. But you're always paying a little bit more. So I think it is similar with weapons and Psi. It's those soft skills that maybe are different.
Maybe they were trying to encourage the use of those. You know what I mean? Once you get in, that you keep committing to them and upgrading them to make that lower barrier of entry. Once you've done the initial, I don't know. It's a good point. It's kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way.
Yeah, I was very surprised to find that, to notice that.
So it's interesting because I'm positive I have not put any points into research so far. And I have been able to research stuff.
I wonder if you get that as part of OSA or from the level stuff from the sort of level select at the beginning.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me to get those sort of benefits, because I think hacking was a thing I could have chosen to get an initial skill level in from that sort of between the tutorials and the actual start of the game proper, little RPG-ish character sheet filling out that I was talking about last time. I definitely feel like there were opportunities there to get those soft skills, and I mostly chose to get the weapon skills. Energy weapons were a thing that I got, and I have an energy weapon, although it's spent most of the game broken so far. Yeah, it's I used it to kill off that robot. That happens, but
that robot is still alive for me.
Oh, really?
Oh man, so I don't know if we want to shift topics, but another category of stuff I wanted to talk about, just psi and difficulty.
Let's get into it.
I'm pretty sure I will regret my decision over the course of the game, but and as you mentioned last time, for this game, psi is kind of the the magic equivalent, which is a good point. It basically is, and the irony is that I almost never play magic users in RPGs. Just not my thing. And so it's weird for me because I do feel like I've chosen a path that I don't typically take. And turrets, robots, basically I'm completely ineffective against them. I have very little I can do. I can waste all of my side points, to my power to take a turret out here and there. But I actually found a clever way to take care of some of those robots in the cargo area, which was an accident, but you can actually lower the elevator on top of them if they were underneath the elevator.
Yep.
And destroy them that way, which I didn't know. I had found out accidentally. So then I basically set a series of traps and lured a bunch of them over there and just killed all the robots I could by just lowering the elevator on top of their heads over and over again. And
oh, wow, that's amazing.
Otherwise, I just run by them all. I don't blow up turrets, I don't blow up those robots, I just run around and hide.
Yeah, so in that room with the 2 turrets and a camera to get from, brutal, right? And I think there's an level load right behind that. So you're basically moving from there into this other area. You have a quick level load, well, quick these days with our fast hard drives. But I tried to get through that. I was low on all sorts of resources, and I had remaining to me a speed boost. I don't know, hypo or whatever. Yep. Yeah, so you jam yourself with that, and although there's like a security room in there that you can hack and actually turn those things off, no way was I ever going to do that. I remember in my initial play, playing as an OSA psi character, I definitely could not get through that area.
The good news is that the cameras I can take out in one shot of my psi blast, so I can take cameras out easily.
Right, and I can too because I can use shotguns. So
right.
I think the game sort of, enables that for you. It makes it pretty easy to have avenues to do that. Maybe there's with the Navy character, maybe it's easy to hack into that a little bit more quickly. I mean, one of the problems with the hacking game is that if you're hacking and you can't see what's coming, you might have a creature spawn and kind of walk up to you and start wailing on you, which is really interesting. I mean, you never see that in games anymore. The world just keeps running. It doesn't matter that you brought up the HUD, which feels like a pause, right? It's I'm going to go, muddle around in my inventory or look at the notes or try to find an audio log that I haven't played. And it sort of forces you to always be aware that something might come up behind you.
Well, a simple example of the spiritual successor of this game in BioShock 1, they had their hacking thing, and that was full screen, UI, and I believe when you went into it, you were generally safe. Am I misremembering that, or were you also vulnerable?
Right. No, I think it essentially paused the world.
They just we mentioned it last time too, but not to switch topics, but this just a quick aside. there's so much Bioshock in this game. Like if I had played, love Bioshock, by the way, but if I had played this game, say, for instance, right before playing Bioshock 1, it would be very telling for people, I think, because the template between the two games is so close. I had forgotten, down to the hacking,
right?
Some of the story stuff we'll get to later, I'm sure. Like lots of really, that we talked about the respawn chambers and all that stuff.
Quantum entanglement reconstruction tanks.
Yeah. God, how do you remember that? So I just forgetting, and even some of the themes, and some of the voice acting stuff. Just so, not to say that
the use of the audio logs, absolutely, yeah, oh yeah.
But I just forgot how close tone, the horror elements and such, and some of the construction of the levels. So very interesting.
Yeah,
they had more forward momentum, I guess, in Bioshock, a little bit more traditional there. But to your point of the usability,
and I think less reuse of space.
Yeah. It was more obviously Unreal in that case. So maybe that was some of the reasons they did that. So I know you can definitely do those games in Unreal as well. Like isn't Dishonored is Unreal as well? I think.
It is, yes, so yes,
much more destruction.
Right, but it's also, you're not revisiting spaces often. I mean, you might, in the context of a single mission, rework over certain areas, but it is different in the sense that there's not often a lot of connection from one level to the other. I mean, even doing Republic Commando, in order to, it didn't come out of the box with even persisting inventory across levels. So if you had carried, the bowcaster or whatever to the end of a level, we actually had to write code to deal with carrying that to the next level.
Right.
And that wasn't supported kind of out of the box, which was surprising to me at the time. That wasn't there.
So tell me about your. Are you ready to talk about your
most horrific moment? Yeah, absolutely. So
I have a few too, but I want to hear your legendary one.
Yeah, my scariest moment in games occurred while playing this game. At the time, I was living in. It's one of them. It's certainly in the top 10, top 5 probably. But I was living in Northern California, as we both were, and I was in an apartment, and the computer desk was sort of in the dining area next to a window. Like, I didn't do a ton of gaming at home. I had a baby, I had a 1 or 1.5 year old when I was playing this game, and so I just didn't have a ton of time to play games. But one night I was playing this game, and, we have those ghostly apparitions that appear, they're these sort of white, transparent, things that are in the environment. And I was sitting in my dining room, and I was in basically one of those hallways that lead to those turrets, or maybe right afterwards. But it was like in that area, and you would have these, and I think it was like my second time visiting. I was like really, kind of invested in, okay, I've got to get to this thing so I could put this MacGuffin in the device so I can unlock the next thing, whatever. So I'm really focused and peering, and I know I've got these turrets that I've got to deal with. And so just as I'm doing that, I start, and here I am. I'm in the dark. I've got a window in front of me. There's no lighting in my house, a very sort of light, dimmable dining room lighting. And I'm creeping up through these hallways, and because I don't remember exactly how far I have to go before I'm going to have this sort of thing that I have had trouble getting past. And I'm looking, and I start seeing, what looks like a ghostly figure, right? And I'm like, oh man, it's another story bit. I'm not sure how I missed that. And so I'm peering at it, and I'm sort of creeping up, and it's getting larger and closer and larger. And then I'm there, and I'm like, what is going on? I've got the headphones on. I'm craning to get what I'm supposed to get out of this moment. When suddenly it reaches out and touches me on the shoulder. And it turns out it was my then wife, who was dressed in her pajamas, white pajamas, who had come up behind me through the kitchen into this dining area, and I was just seeing her reflection on the monitor. It was horrifying. I leaped. I mean, I just I mean, when you say that I leaped out of my chair, you say that to people like I was that scared. I mean, like I literally jumped out of the chair fell over, I turned around, the headphones ripped out of the speakers, and she's like, "What is up, God?" She's freaking out. She was pregnant at the time. I mean, it was like a nightmare.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was good. Because it was sort of that hazy, like ghost thing. You know, it was like, oh, I've triggered something I somehow didn't trigger before. I was like craning for a little bit of story. I'm so like focused on that when I play often. It was good. It was good.
I think I have a vague memory of you telling the story when we were playing back then too. So awesome. And it was probably like a CRT too, so it was probably even more.
Exactly. It was a CRT. So and it was fairly big. I still have it somewhere, but it was a fairly big. I was so proud. I had this bigger, one of those big, like I don't know, they're probably 50 pounds. They're so heavy. But big screen on my desk, and I was like, oh, I was so thrilled. And then I nearly had a pants incident as a result. It was good stuff.
Well, I mean, just like the as we talked about last time, it's just a testament to this game that even though it's sparse and even though it is, pretty, low res and simple in its kind of visual and environmental storytelling, as opposed to, as we were just talking about with BioShock, that just did a great job at that and was just jam packed full of detail. I still find it very effective for when it comes to the horror side of this. It's not even because I don't think they have many, other than the ghosts, they don't have many scripted moments like a Dead Space or something would when it comes to introductions.
Right.
They do occasionally, but often for me at least, it's been an enemy has respawned that is just systemic and just more emergent, and it just has wandered near where I am, and I turn around and it's there, or it's running at me, and it just freaks the hell out of me.
Right.
And I remember playing the cargo section this time specifically, which is not my favorite section, but as soon, and this actually happens, obviously you meet the monkeys in the first section before this, but for whatever reason in the past I just still have this vivid memory of the cargo sections and the monkeys section specifically, and not until I started playing this game did I remember whenever I hear monkeys, like in this game, I realize there's this kind of back of my head kind of like subconscious fear for that, like that sound that they make, that that
exactly.
And it was this game. It was this game's fault, where this kind of irrational, no pun intended, feeling about monkeys like this, I think, came from. And I forgot until the.
I had forgotten too. The audio cues are very good. In fact, they might be the best part of enemy introductions, or enemy signaling, because this game doesn't do a good job of introducing enemies. In fact, it often doesn't introduce them at all.
No, they're just there.
They're just there, and you just happen across them, for the first time. And it's actually possible, I think, in cases, to meet an enemy for a first time in different locations. For me, the cyber midwife character, it's possible to meet that character while you're still in engineering. I don't know if you did that, but there's a section that you can kind of go down a long elevator and then cross through a long tunnel and come up on another area in the level.
Oh, no, I don't think I did that.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to recommend going that path, but it does have one of those cyber midwives at the end. And it's not introduced in any way. I mean, one of the things we talked about on Republic Commando a lot was how each enemy was going to be introduced, and presented to the player as a new type of challenge. And I'm thinking, like, from everything to those little droids that would attach to your head, to the bigger Trandoshan heavy character, whatever. We had specific places where we controlled that we knew you were going to be going this way, and we could do a proper introduction of a character and sort of give it some character. And this game doesn't do that at all. I mean, not at all, with the possible exception of the zombies, just because the only way into the game is to go through that one door where there's one kind of there waiting, I mean, it's not even sort of in your face. It's just it's up ahead, and it sees you as you come through this door.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting to me because this, it feels like other games did introductions a little bit better, like Doom, for example.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, or even Quake.
Quake. Yeah. Yeah.
Has much better enemy introductions. There's very little. There's very little that prepares you for those characters.
I mean, the other side of that, though, which seems like kind of we have an emerging theme here that was unintended, but just that sense of, and the progression of this kind of design when we get into Deus Ex and other games, and when emergence started emerging as a concept in games around that time. I probably give Warren Spector too much credit for it, but he talked a lot about it, and it became a theme that I think as an industry we started thinking about more. They don't have enemy introductions, but the fact that we can tell different stories about the first time that we did meet an enemy, and it is unexpected, and you're not sure where it's going to happen. There's something to be said for that as well. It's just a different way to do it because the introduction becomes more immersion, it becomes more unexpected and systemic, and those are in some ways make better water cooler conversations with people because you just don't know. Everyone's going to have a different experience. So
yeah, that's very true.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah, I mean, when in a Elder Scrolls game or the Fallout series, when you encounter creatures for the first time, it can be very memorable and totally different from what your buddy has.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of value in that, and of course, those systems have become more robust and interesting over time. Like in the Elder Scrolls series, in Skyrim, you might run into a cave near the beginning of the game, and if you go at level 5 versus level 15, you might encounter a literal different creature there, and it might be the first time you run into that creature. It's like some sort of bear versus, I don't know, some other sort of lesser sort of creature, like a wolf or something. And that having that moment happen just emergent from the systems in how leveled lists of creatures are built and things like that is really interesting. Here it's more entirely tied to the spaces themselves, and you may not even have to go through certain spaces in order to reach those creatures. For me, going through this long tunnel that I can't even honestly think of how this would really fit into the ship, but but delving down this elevator and then going through this space and coming up on the other side, I mean, it didn't really game me anything, but I was introduced to that character earlier than I guess you were.
Yeah. Well, on the other side of it that relates to emergence and also player agency, because it's way more systemic and kind of, and Thief actually did a good job of this as well. As a player, I can choose, like in Republic Commando, especially the introductions, but any game that kind of had more of that forward momentum thrust of the level design, things will generally play out other than within the room space itself and the encounter space. Overall things will play out similarly for each person. But because I know that there is some rough AI behind these things, like the robots, for example, with the elevator, right? Like, you can make some decisions as a player to try to exploit those systems and the AI and kind of lure them around and kind of set things up. And which, as a segue to another, general concept that I wanted to mention, as far as playing as a Psi, I feel like I'm at such a disadvantage all the time that I have to come up with these crazy tactics to get by something.
Yeah.
Something as simple as one laser turret.
Right.
And I think it's taking me longer to play the game because I try a bunch of stuff, literally dying, trial and error, and then reload because my plans are not working because it's the only way I would be able to do it because I have literally no options or very few options.
Right.
But at least I can try stuff in this game, right? It's not going to play out the same way every time, so I can actually use the systems against themselves.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, and actually, I think that actually ties in a little bit to one of the things I was sort of questioning. Like, for me, I actually, because you cover space in this sort of engine core area multiple times. Like, you have to go deep into the level to get into the cargo bays.
Yeah.
And you have to go... my initial time in there, I didn't find the key that I needed. Because beyond Cargo 2B, there's a separate area which is not... I don't think is reflected on the one side, Cargo 1 side. So, like, you have to go deeper in, and I didn't even realize that area was there. I was expecting symmetry that wasn't present. And I didn't find the key, and I came back out, and I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Spent a lot of time, that's when I went up to Command Core, and then I'm like, well, there's nothing up here, and I went back, and then I happened upon it, having to run past, these giant robots that I'm worried about. I was curious, as a level designer primarily, like what you felt about that, that sort of, that retreading of space, some of which is due to a lack of player direction, but then later on you actually have to go back into the other engine area and then return to the sort of command core. So there is some deliberate retreading as well as sort of accidental retreading that both of us encountered.
Yeah, I'm very mixed on it because I understand maybe there may have been some I don't know, economy to their decisions in there, right? When it comes to reuse or what have you. I think clearly one of their macro goals, though, was also trying to deliver a sense of I have a note down here of just cohesive ship,
right? Where
you get a sense that it is all connected and that it's kind of logical that the cargo bays are where they are and all this stuff and blah blah blah. And so, but those moments where you get an audio log where the lady that you find that key on, the dead body, she says, I'm going to Cargo Bay 2 to hide or reprogram the code or whatever. And you kind of, at least for me, you kind of instantly know that it's basically just a key card mission, and they're like, they just put her in there, gave you a loose hint through this audio log, and then you just got to go hunting and pecking around until you find it. And I feel like there's better ways that that they could have done that, and you kind of again I go back to that question of which came first. Did the key was the key put there later, or did they just build cargo and then they filled it up? I mean, one good obvious thing that they did for the cargo bays is they inhabited each section slightly differently. So there was the monkey section and there was the robot section, and there's the so you kind of had a little bit of sense of identity, but I got lost in there all the time, and I'm a completist, so I didn't want to miss any object, so I looked in every floor and every level.
Yep, I did too. Yeah, I think that, and actually that particular area with the robots gave me the sense of being like, I don't know, I guess it was very similar to sort of like Alien Isolation, which I'm not sure whether you played, but or in the sort of tension that builds in an alien film where you go into an area which has got a ton of these eggs that the aliens are going to come out of. You go into that robot section and there's a ton of these robot cases, and you don't know which ones are going to open. Are they all going to open? I was stepping through there and I'm like, do I want to wail on all these things, to destroy them? Because if these all open up, I'm in bad shape. I was terrified, right? And I have weapons. I can shoot from a long distance, and, maybe I could chain reaction some of that stuff. But there was definitely, for me, entering into that, there was a delicious tension. Totally different from the tension that came from the monkeys of, they sort of telegraph, I'm here. You don't know where I am. I guess it's all working on different sorts of uncertainty. Like in the robots, it's, I don't know which of these dozens of robots are going to activate. Whereas with the monkeys, it's like, I know there's one or two of those things out there. I have no idea where they are, and they have this sort of long range attack. So they might just kill me from behind. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I was going to ask you about that. If those pods that the robots are in, if they were part of the emergent systems or not, or if only certain ones would open. I get the feeling that if you were to cause enough commotion, all of them could open. But I could be wrong on that.
I don't think so. I think a few of them are actually scripted to open. And I think once they start opening them, more of them will open. But at the beginning, you have to go, there's like one on the ground, and you have to go right next to it in order to pass them. And doing so means you also have to pass another one that's upright. So it's like not actually possible to get past the opening area without having the tension of this thing may open on me. Yeah. But they don't. And they never do.
There's a couple sections. Yeah, those in particular didn't seem to. There's a couple areas later where they're clumped together more. Right. And I was, because of all my trial and error, I was fooling around to see what would happen. And there definitely were times when, like, there's one, I don't know if you remember, there's a turret, a laser turret, and then there's some surrounding it, sort of.
Right, right.
If you blow that turret up, it'll open all of them, essentially.
Really?
Yeah, and then the turret itself I got it, I put myself behind one of the pods, and the turret was shooting the pod, and it opened up just that one when it blew it up. And so because of my sort of I will call handicap at this point, I actually played the cargo section way different than I did the first time, because I basically played stealth just to try it out, and I walked literally through and by slowly, stealthily, just to see if there was any stealth mechanics happening, because I couldn't remember.
Right.
And it actually worked. Like, I could walk by all those pods and maybe you did the same thing, but
I'm a bull. I'm running through the China shop when I play.
Yeah,
I got all this weaponry, so.
If one of the robots would find me, and you have the good audio cues about when they actually have found you and are coming after you, I would go and hide, and they would lose track of me and go back to what they were doing, and then I would run, I'd sneak by them.
Oh, that's good.
Completely changed the way I played that area. It obviously took longer, of course, but
right.
It was interesting that they kind of still had a little bit of thief thrown in there. So.
Wow. Well, the last thing from this section that I think I want to touch on, because I think we talked briefly about it at the beginning or in the middle of the first podcast, was the quantum entanglement reconstruction tanks. Like, I actually use that to my advantage to traverse the levels more quickly. Because once in a level area that you've, signed into one of them or whatever, you've basically activated and made it a point that it'll reconstruct you from, it is possible to allow yourself to be killed, reconstruct further on, and then, move back. So I almost feel like a savvy player can use that to his advantage. I mean, going through, as I mentioned, those two turrets with the camera, like, I didn't want to have to try to pass back through that. So what I did instead was, I'll just park myself on this side where the camera can't see me, but this turret can, and it'll kill me, and it'll put me way over there, which is nearer to where I want to go. And similarly, coming back, I would run through that turret area, take a bunch of damage, get through the level load, and now the level load is basically tied to the next quantum reconstruction tank.
Right.
So I got killed soon after because there was enemies that had spawned, and they would kill me, and I'd turn up right near where my goal was. So I don't know if that was meant to be sort of almost Super Mario Brothers shorthand for cutting ahead, to later in the game. But it certainly functioned that way for me in those two instances. I haven't found that useful in hydroponics, but certainly in this area I did.
Well, I'm definitely using them, for that reason, but also because I'm so resource starved, I will pick and choose when. I generally reload a lot, but there are definitely times when it's more advantageous for me just to let that system play out. And, you get, for me at least, I get enough health back to where it could be better for me. It just costs 10 nanites, I think, to do a reconstruction. So I usually have those. So it's actually better for me. And I'm probably getting away from whatever enemy killed me, so I kind of get a bit of a breather.
Right. Absolutely. All right, well, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about maybe what we've been playing and other than this in the meantime. because I know you've been sneaking off to do this instead of your homework, and and then we'll talk about what we'll do next time.
Okay.
The radiation must have locked the protective seals on engine core access. You're going to have to find some way to purge the radiation from the coolant tubes. Xerxes is blocking me out of the primary data loop, so I can't get any information to help you. He's working for them now.
Hello, we're back from the break, and I think we'll close out this episode by talking about what we've been playing outside of System Shock 2. I know that you've been playing hooky from System Shock 2 time to time, Tim. What you been playing?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So much so that we had to push this recording in particular, and I'm making Brett's life a little harder. But yeah, I'm playing Witcher 3, still playing Witcher 3. I will be playing Witcher 3 for a long, long time. As I've mentioned before, I tend to be a completist, and that is not a good game to be a completist in. Hard to kind of find some, obviously other than RPG and kind of like the kind of macro tropes that it has, it's hard to find some specific, references to the System Shock, of course, or any connections. But man, I am a big fan of that franchise, and I'm just in so deep. So that's why I was playing hooky. I just wanted to keep playing and kept pushing off, System Shock to get some more time. I have so little time to play games right now as it is, so I'm being selfish. But yeah, Witcher 3 for quite a long time.
Yeah, I will get to it someday. I actually started playing it around the time it came out. I maybe bought it a couple weeks after it released, and I bounced off it a little bit. I don't know why, although I know
it's understandable.
Well, around that time, I also had some back troubles, and I had it on my PC where I have to stand if I'm going to play because I have a walking desk. So I was not able to play because of physical troubles. So instead, when it was out, I was playing the Mass Effect series. So because I could lie on my back and play my Xbox 360 in my living room.
What about you? What have you been playing?
I've been playing Uncharted, the Uncharted series again. It had a PS4 remaster sometime last year, and I know that the new Uncharted 4 is coming out, A Thief's End, now in May. And I had wanted to play through those games again in advance of the fourth game coming out. I'm a huge fan of that series. I really love what Naughty Dog has done kind of overall, but certainly last gen they really came into their own with character action games. The only connection I really see with System Shock 2 is that it's kind of the anti-System Shock 2 in that the sort of only differences between my playthrough and if you were to play it through, Tim, would be what weapons we choose at different specific times. It has the sort of Halo-esque carry two weapons thing, and really the only distinctions in different areas are going to be, well, which two do I have? You're going to have a pistol of some kind, but do you have a hand cannon with no, basically a limited, 6 or 7 shots of ammo, or do you have a pistol that takes a lot of shots and can work if you're very precise, but not a lot of stopping power otherwise, right? Or do you have the AK versus like the M79, which is essentially the grenade launcher? In System Shock 2, it's whatever you can fit into your inventory. If you want to carry every weapon, if you want to have 6 wrenches, knock yourself out. But this is very, very different in that way. The only customization of play is through the choices you make with cover and things like that, things that are not really present in the System Shock game. And there's a little bit of cover, I guess, but not much. It's not a game that offers a lot of cover. Anyway, why don't you catch up our listeners on what we're going to play through next time?
Yeah, so we're trying to again go after about a 4-hour chunk, and so we're going to try to get through the rest of hydroponics. Of course, we're about halfway through that section, up through ops, which is our current sort of macro objective that we've been given, and try to get through recreation, which I think is Deck 5 as well. And we're estimating that's around a 4-hour chunk. So try to stop at the end of recreation, and if if that ends up being too long of a chunk, we'll keep people up to date or something. But that's the current goal.
All right. Well, you can be kept up to date as to where we'll be either by following the podcast on Twitter, which is at DevGameClub. You can track down the show notes at devgameclub.com. And if you'd like to shoot us an email at devgameclub@gmail.com, we may read those on a future episode. In the meantime, I'm at Brett_Duville on Twitter with my co-host
at Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
Well, thanks very much for coming along for this Part 2, second beta edition of the Dev Game Club podcast. Signing off, and we'll merge with you next time. Bye now.